Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
It's taken 40 years and a complete change of heart. But today, Jeremy Corbyn set out the case for Britain to stay in the EU in his first major speech of the referendum campaign. The Labour leader said the UK should remain inside Europe to fight for reform, although he said he was still critical of its shortcomings. Less than a year ago, Mr. Corbyn said he wouldn't rule out voting for Brexit. So what's changed his mind? Here's our political editor, Gary Gibbon.
A show of strength from the Remain campaign today. Former Labour and Lib Dem leaders side by side with David Cameron on a campaign phone bank. But the present Labour leader making his first campaign speech for EU membership was their proudest recruit.
Just imagine what the Tories would do to workers' rights here in Britain if we voted to leave the EU in June. They would dump rights on equal pay, working time, annual leave, agency workers, maternity pay as fast as they could get away with it. It would be a bonfire of rights that Labour governments have secured and trade unions have helped to secure across the whole of this continent.
He said if Britain quit Europe, Boris Johnson could soon be Prime Minister and negotiating the exit terms.
You cannot build a better world unless you engage with the world, build allies and deliver change. The European Union, many warts and all, has proved itself to be a crucial international framework to do that. That's why we're backing the Britain Remain in Europe campaign, and I hope you will too. Thank you very much.
For his entire political life, Jeremy Corbyn has been a hardline critic of the European Union, voting against membership, against treaties, always sniffing a boss-class conspiracy.
It takes away the power to set any economic policy from any national parliament and hands it over to an unelected set of bankers.
Even as he ran for the leadership last year, he wasn't ruling out pulling out.
Jeremy, would you rule out voting no or campaigning for no?
No, I wouldn't rule it out.
Mr. Corbyn, your first speech on the EU comes pretty late in the day. How do you hope to convince people with such a half-hearted approach?
And you'll hear plenty from us on this. There's nothing half-hearted about anything I do.
I think he tried very hard to look like he believed it. I don't personally think that he feels that there will be any chance of real reform in the European Union. And I'm disappointed that he felt he had to say what he did.
He was speaking in the building that housed Britain's wartime propaganda headquarters, the inspiration for George Orwell's Ministry of Truth and for Graham Greene's Ministry of Fear. Just when Jeremy Corbyn thought perhaps he'd had all the big, shocking surprises he was going to have in his political career, he finds himself begged by the Tory-led Project Fear to come to the old Ministry of Fear and defend the pro-EU campaign. It's a sign of how tense, how tight this referendum battle has become.
Look, these things go neck and neck. It's a plebiscite. It can kind of go up and down. But I think it was a very effective speech, and more effective for the fact that Jeremy's obviously a convert to this.
Take a lot of pressure to get in there?
No, not at all.
Really?
More than happy to do
This is the Ministry of Truth, you know. Here he is today, Jeremy Corbyn, basically trying to save David Cameron's bacon.
He has to, because this is about the national interest. It cannot be to anybody's advantage for Boris Johnson, Nigel Farage government to take over on the 24th of June.
David Cameron needs big Labour figures to connect with past Labour voters who instinctively reject any pleas from a Tory Prime Minister.
Well, it's David Cameron calling. I'm calling from the Stronger In campaign.
If he wins, he may owe Jeremy Corbyn a phone call.
Well, Mr Corbyn might have been converted to the European cause, but plenty of Labour members are unconvinced, like Sandwell in the West Midlands, where many are deeply sceptical and where young people feel completely disengaged from the entire debate, despite a new drive to persuade them to vote. Our Home Affairs correspondent Darshana Soni has this report.
Labour is convinced that a vote to remain in is in the best interests of the people of this country.
It's market day here in West Bromwich. Sandwell is a traditional Labour stronghold, but it's also in the top 10 of areas that are the most Eurosceptic in the whole country. So what have voters here made of Jeremy Corbyn's speech today?
It's perfectly possible to be critical and still be convinced we need to remain a member.
And what do you think about Corbyn's come out today in favour of staying in? What do you feel about that?
I think he's just flowing with the tide. Who he wants to please, I've no idea.
Peter Bridger has owned his own businesses for decades and still remembers the Labour leader's position in the last referendum.
He changed the tune from when we joined the command market, was he 75? And he was really against this, and he was hoo-haing all the pro members for doing that. And here he is now.
A new YouGov poll suggests support for in and out is neck and neck, and it could be young people who decide the outcome. At Sandwell College, students are back from their Easter break. The Remain campaign is well aware it needs to mobilise the 18 to 35s. They're more likely to be pro-European, but are less likely to vote, something we found when we talked to Rachel and her friend Riffit.
Are most people your age, are they following the campaign? Are they talking about the EU referendum?
Most of our generations do not understand anything about the EU due to the fact that it's not understandable for us. So that they can be speaking, as in we can be watching the House of Commons and David Cameron, and we just be looking at them like, what are they saying?
So it's not something that people in your class are talking about?
No. We talk about Snapchat, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter.
The college prides itself on its diversity, with students and staff from 96 different nationalities represented here. For some, immigration will play a big part in their decision on how to vote.
Obviously our parents are immigrants, and you know how people say like immigrants take our jobs, there's not enough space for them? Well, if anything, they're doing all the jobs that none of us want to do.
This is an area that has seen successive waves of immigration, from the Asian subcontinent and the Caribbean to more recent arrivals. But it's by no means the only issue that will influence voters here. The High Street has suffered the loss of big chains, and for many it's all about the economy and jobs.
It's about the only thing we do agree on.
And what do you both feel, in or out?
Out. Definitely out. There's too much propaganda going on at the minute, you know.
Propaganda or persuasion, whatever your views, expect much, much more of it in the weeks to come, as the official referendum campaign starts tomorrow. Darshna Soni, Channel 4 News, Sandwell.